A Christian undergoes tribulations because of the system at which the believer finds himself in. Paul is telling us to rejoice, that anytime there is a tribulation, we should rejoice. What is inside of tribulation that Paul entrusts the believer to rejoice when the believer is going through pain, suffering, and anguish? There is something inside tribulation that most Christians do not know. And after tonight, each and every one of you is going to find out the reason why the scripture is saying we should glory in tribulation. Before that, let us look at God. What is it about God that He is an unknowing God? He seems to know everything. He seems to have all power. But yet He allows His creation, His beloved, go through pain and suffering, and yet He does not show up. We see one time that His own people were being captured, and they were captured and they were being taken into captivity, and yet He did not come to their rescue. But when a material, an object that was found in the house of the Lord was abused, His anger arose, and the Bible said there was a hand that appeared upon the world, writing Menel Tekel Ophesin, O king. He placed a judgment on the enemy, not because the enemy suppressed his people, but the enemy suppressed an object that was not a living object. What is this about God? This God that when they were trying to kill me, Abel, He saw everything and never rose up. He watched me to be afflicted until I was killed. And when I was killed, now He had the guts and ability to stand in the court of heaven and ask my adversary that where is your brother? And yet He was looking at Abel, suffering affliction and yet death. And what is it about tribulation? That this God is saying that in tribulation, that everyone see a kind of suffering, a kind of pain, a kind of anguish. This God is saying there is a glory. That my suffering ignites a certain glory. The Israelites were in captivity, and we see that when they were in captivity, they were being afflicted. And we see very well that as a matter of their affliction, the Bible said the more they were afflicted, the more they were multiplied. What is this about the afflictions of the righteous that causes a multiplication? That whenever a Christian is not afflicted, there is no multiplication. That the people of God can only multiply only when there was an affliction. And they multiplied even in such a manner that their adversary were afraid that when an enemy comes to attack them, the Israelites might join them to fight them, to overthrow them. My question is, what is that with the child of God that you afflict him? What is this about the child of God that whenever you pull him down, the more he rises up? What is it about this child of God that the day you fire him from work, that's the beginning of his new operation? What is this about the child of God that the day you afflict him, the day you throw him down, that is the day a new program is installed? What is this about the child of God that the day you castigate him, that was the day a new project is being handed unto him? And what is this about affliction? That it is only in the burning furnace, that is where a miracle happens. It is this about the child of God that whenever he has been castigated that he is weak, that is where the Bible said, let the weak say I am strong. What is this about the child of God? That he glories in tribulations. That the more he is being afflicted, the more he counts his glory. What is the mission of this child of God? That when the men say you are weak, when you discover weakness on your body, that is where you start to count your strengths. My God, are you aware that the greatest healers were once the greatest sickless? That the greatest healers ever recorded in church history were the greatest sickless. Let me tell you about the mystery of pearls and oyster. Now, an oyster is a certain sea animal that is embedded in its shells. Now, One of the most expensive and beautiful things ever on earth is a pearl. Let me tell you how pearls are made and how pearls are being discovered. There is a marine species called an oyster. Pearls are being made by oysters. There is a different kind of oysters that are special, that makes pearls. Now, the making of pearls by oysters, or these different kinds of oysters, there is sand or particles that enters the shell of this oyster. When it enters the shell of the oyster, it causes the oyster to irritate, or it suppresses the oyster because it comes to distract the oyster from its comfort area. So it enters the shell and brings pain, intense irritation, anguish to the animal oyster. Now, what the oyster does in its irritation, it begins to throw off its shell against the waters. The shell gives part of the shell to the sun and it covers it thereof in the mixture of CaCO3, and then it covers it in a way that it produces a certain stone, which is the pearl. This pearl is the most difficult thing to find. And look at how it is being made. The passage and the description of pain, irritation, and anguish of an oyster. This is the reason why Jesus is saying, do not throw your pearls before swine. Anytime you suffer affliction, you produce a pearl. And let me shock you, anytime the oyster produce a pearl, one irritation or one affliction is equals to one pearl. So the number of pearls you can contain or you can possess is calculated by the number of afflictions. So if you are listening to me and you are being afflicted, understand that you can count your pearls, you can count your glory by how many times you are being afflicted. Child of God, we glory in afflictions. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities. Anytime I am being afflicted, anytime I am sick, I know that I became sick because there is a glory coming. Anytime I am being admitted, anytime I am being denied the job, I know that there is a glory coming. Kabado Shabalabadia.